Today on TimesCast, the lawyer for the suspect in the Norwegian killings discusses his client's mental state.
He's sorry that it was necessary, but it was necessary, he says.
As politicians fight over raising the debt limit, a look back at how the country sank so far into the red. And Dunkin Donuts goes to Wall Street to fund a big expansion.
4 days after the attacks in Norway, new details are beginning to emerge about the perpetrator, an anti-Islam extremist named Anders Behring Breivik, who is in prison on terrorism charges.
He's sorry that it was necessary, but it was necessary, he says.
Today, Breivik's lawyer gave a press conference in which he portrayed his client as very cold.
This whole case is indicated he's insane.
While he didn't enter specifically insanity plea, his comments made clear that they might seek this in the future. Breivik's lawyer said his client viewed himself as a kind of savior, tasked with driving out Muslims that he says are destroying European society. He also said that his client had taken some sort of stimulant drugs to remain alert, as well as other drugs to remain strong, though he didn't name the drugs in question. The main question right now for investigators is whether Breivik worked alone. Initially, he claimed that he had done so, but in court yesterday, he claimed that he was part of a larger organization that he called the Knights Templar, and that there were several other cells operating in Western Europe. Breivik also told his lawyer that he expected to be arrested much sooner than he did. Police have been criticized for their slow response to the attacks. They took well over an hour to reach the island of Utøya, where the summer camp was located. This gave Breivik time to methodically hunt down and kill his victims. Given the timing and the number of people killed on the island, Breivik killed about one person a minute, and critics have said that even if the police arrived just a short time earlier, many lives could have been saved. Many here are now saying that Norway's culture of openness might need to change.
Washington's inability to come to a debt limit agreement has many Americans asking, how did we get here? Louise Story looks back.
For weeks, we've been hearing about the political debate in Washington over the nation's debt limit. But before this, many Americans may never have known that our nation had a borrowing limit. Congress introduced it in 1917 to address some concerns over the nation's borrowing to pay for World War I. Before that, Congress had to vote on exactly how much it would spend and what it would spend it on each time. When they introduced the debt limit, Congress also gave the Treasury Department more freedom on how it spent borrowed money, and they expanded that free rein in the 1930s. But the debt limit has not exactly reined the country in because, since then, Congress has increased it 102 times. And in the last decade, it's been raised 10 times. Just back in 2002, it was $6.4 trillion. Now it's $14.3 trillion, and they're debating raising it a lot higher, potentially up to $16 trillion. You might wonder, as we increase this debt limit up and up and up, who is so willing to loan money to the United States? Well, one big party is China.
I want to welcome the president of China to our ranch.
It's amazing if you think about where they were just in 2001. China only owned about $79 billion of U.S. treasuries back then. And just in the last few years, they've gone over $1 trillion. The positive side of having countries like China that lend us all this money is that it keeps interest rates low across the entire U.S. economy. If the country can borrow at a cheap rate, it means that companies pay less to borrow and our credit card and mortgage interest rates are lower.
Come into their purchasing stage and are off on a wild, non-stop ride.
But the negative side, as the United States debt has grown, is that the interest payments we have to pay each year to all these lenders has grown a lot too. And so what's been at risk here as Congress debates the debt and the debt limit is that international investors and buyers of treasuries will say to the United States, we want more interest, just like your credit card company would say to you if you missed a payment.
And Evelyn Risley looks at Dunkin Donuts' public offering and its plans to compete with Starbucks.
The Dunkin Brands Group is probably best known for one thing, Dunkin Donuts.
The company is preparing for an initial public offering as early as tomorrow. This will likely raise more than $400 million for the donut maker, whose owners include private equity firms like Bain Capital and Carlyle Group. The cash will allow the Dunkin Group to focus on expanding, to challenge its biggest rivals. Despite its name, the company actually makes most of its money selling coffee. That's why Dunkin is targeting Starbucks. On this New York block, the two companies fight for the same customers.
I prefer Dunkin' Donuts over, say, a Starbucks or a specialty coffee shop just because it's not pretentious.
Well, I think someone that drinks Starbucks coffee is more of a sophisticated coffee drinker that prefers the more fancy types of drinks.
I find more Starbucks than Dunkin' Donuts on every street corner.
At least there used to be more Dunkin' Donuts than there were Starbucks, so you'd pass them on the way to work. That's where you'd stop in and get it, and it's good coffee.
Here's how the two companies stack up. Seattle-based Starbucks has more than 17,000 stores in the United States. Meanwhile, Dunkin' Brands is headquartered in Massachusetts and has more than 6,700 U.S. locations. Starbucks' revenue last year was $10.7 billion, while Dunkin's was $6 billion. Dunkin's is casting itself as a coffee for the working man, a place for quick value and reliable quality. This contrasts with Starbucks, which has focused more on a lifestyle strategy. It wants its customers to see its stores as a destination. If Dunkin's strategy proves successful, Dunkin' Donuts may have to change its well-worn slogan. It's time to make the coffee.